Nice to see so many people. Yeah, it's really, really, really good. Some people from the retreat as well, from the weekend. Yeah, so I was going to talk about anger at first, and then I thought, why don't I chuck in hatred as well? And then, well, if I do that, it's probably best to talk about love. So that's the theme. And as Sunzakini said, it's the overarching sort of theme of the season is the 21st century Bodhisattva. But one thing about the Buddha's teachings is it's said to be an old Pali word, akaliko, which means timeless. So the Buddha's teachings were said to be timeless. So I'm going to be drawing on some verses from 2,500 years ago, but I hope very much that we'll see that they're they're relevant today in quite a different world. Yeah, or is it? So I'm going to draw from a text, an ancient Buddhist text known as the Dharma, which is a collection of verses. It's about 420 something verses, 423 verses, that were said to have been originally spoken by the Buddha. So that's 2,500 years ago. So these were spoken by the Buddha in a time where he didn't write things down, and these verses would have been memorized by his followers and kept in their memory. So there wasn't, they didn't kind of, take a picture of the text and then save it to the iCloud or something like that. They saved it to the inner iCloud and memorized these. So, which is quite a feat because, it wouldn't have been one person memorizing, although there were individuals who were capable of memorizing, volumes. But it would have been kind of shared out. But that's just amazing that it's come to us. And that oral tradition kept going for hundreds of years before somebody decided to write it down. They did several hundred years later. They wrote down all the Buddhist texts in a language called Pali. That now is the Pali, what we call the Pali Canon, the collection of all the Buddhist teachings in Pali. And Pali was a language similar-ish to the language that the Buddha spoke, I'm told. Yeah, so I think, gosh, if these monks managed to memorize volumes, I could at least learn a few of these verses. And I love in English we've got this phrase, you learn something by heart. And when you do memorize things, it does, it sort of becomes a part of you. And I have found that the sort of few Buddhist texts I know, when I've needed them, they've sort of been there. And so I highly recommend memorizing things that inspire you. So the first verse, we're going to, hopefully if we have time, we'll just briefly look at 7 of them. So the first verse is, let's see if I can remember it. So it's, whoever holds back arisen anger as though holding back a swerving chariot, I call that person a charioteer. Others are merely holders of reins. So whoever holds back arisen anger as though holding back a swerving chariot, that person I call a charioteer. Others are mere holders of reins. I love that verse. I love this sort of, it's so dynamic. I mean, okay, none of us ride a chariot, but I don't think we need to get a sense of the energy, of a chariot being drawn by a horse or horses, and it's swerving and needs to be kept upright. We need to stay in the chariot. So that requires a lot of skill and probably years of practice to hone those skills. And I love that last line, others are merely holders of reins. It's like, la, 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 I'm doing my Buddhist practice, la, la, la. And then, suddenly an emotion comes along, whoop, and I'm out of the chariot. So it really suggests that, we need to practice and hone these, hone our Buddhist practice to learn to work with the energy of anger, because it has a lot of energy in it. So what is anger? What is anger? So I'm going to ask a few questions, and hopefully there'll be time for discussion as well. So the sort of first question is what is your experience of anger? How do you experience anger? For me, I get sort of trembly legs, my breath gets short, it feels quite held. and it feels held and high up. My shoulders kind of do this. I feel hot. Yeah, so and different people react in different ways. But what's the kind of physical, energetic thing that goes on? The Buddha was very much wanted his followers to be aware of what's going on in the heart and the mind and the body. It's so essential. So first we've got to sort of know what this thing is. So just reflecting on what is it like for you physically when you do get angry? And the other question is, and what's your response or reaction when you get angry? What do you tend to do? What do you habitually do? If there's something you habitually do, or there's certain sort of dramas you play out, fight, flight, or freeze is a good good few sort of options. Yeah, because often there's adrenaline going on, and we could then put up a fight, or we could try and just get out of the situation, or we could just go, not say anything. I think that's one I do the others, but I think I can sometimes just freeze, not really know what to do, and not really. You can't hear me. Okay, I can. Can you hear me at the back? Yeah. Just okay. So I tend to freeze. I think, or that's one of my go-tos. So it's good to reflect on what do we do when we get angry. Talking of fight, flight, or freeze, just want to sort of do a little detour and talk about fear, because that's similar, isn't it? Fight, flight, or freeze. It's certainly for me, I feel a large component of anger, when I experience anger, is fear. It's like a huge part of it, actually, is this fearful thing going on. And there's a lovely story from the Pali Canon of the Buddha before he was enlightened. He thought to himself, there are these scary places in the jungle that people go to and their hair stands on end. Why don't I go there? See what happens. So I just love this idea of the Buddha as somebody just curious to find out how he responds to difficult situations. I think it's a very courageous thing. And this kind of enthusiasm and curiosity suggests quite a childlike, sort of innocent approach even to emotions. And I think that's a really good thing to deal with anger if we can. I sometimes think to myself, what would it be like if I could, when I was in a situation getting angry, frustrated with this, or arguing with the person, or whatever, what if I could be saying, "Ooh, that's interesting. I'm getting angry. Oh, my legs are shaking. Oh, my belly's sort of all seized up or something, and my hands are trembling. Oh, I really want to hurt this person," or something like that. It's like, imagine if we could bring this kind of curiosity to these strong emotions, or at least begin to sort of bring them in. Yeah, so back to the Dhammapada, these verses. So, and back to the very beginning, there's some really great verses, very central to Buddhist teachings, at the very beginning of the Dhammapada. I'll try and remember them. So, and they're in a chapter called the Pears. So they sort of come in pairs, they go together. So the first two are, experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. If one speaks or acts with an impure mind, suffering follows, just as the wheel follows the hoof of the ox. Yeah? And then its counterpart is, experiences are preceded by mind, led by mind, and produced by mind. One who speaks or acts with a pure mind, happiness follows, like a shadow that never departs. So it's as if the sun's sort of always shining, and there's always a shadow from the sun. So, yeah, we don't really have time to go into them, but this is, in Buddhism, mind is central, and it precedes our experience. So how our mind is, that will shape how our life is and how our experiences are. So this is why it's so important to learn to meditate and to act ethically and to purify the mind, brighten the mind. Yeah. Next two verses. Those who entertain such thoughts as, he abused me, he beat me, he conquered me, he robbed me, will not still their hatred. Those who do not entertain such thoughts as, he beat me, he robbed me, he beat me, he abused me, he beat me, he conquered me, he robbed me, will still their hatred. So, entertaining those thoughts. Another translation says harbouring those thoughts. Or another one's like sort of bearing those thoughts. So in these sort of 4 verses, there's a real sense of like ownership and taking responsibility. It's kind of up to us. Victimhood. When I'm sort of playing the victim and thinking, people have done this to me, or I'm having a hard time because of this and because of that. I'm not really hearing the Buddha's teaching, and I'm not taking responsibility for my anger, if you like, or my resentment. And are we doing the resentment bhavana, or are we doing the metta bhavana? Are we cultivating resentment, or are we cultivating something brighter and more loving? Yeah, that's the next kind of question to throw in, if there's time. How much do you take responsibility for your anger? Or do you think you should? Discuss. So that's for later. And I think part of that is part of taking responsibility is being willing to say sorry, because of course we're going to muck up. We're going to hurt people, and I think that's just a really, really important thing. And and also certainly in my experience, when people apologise to me, it's so much easier for me to forgive them. And so kind of when if we can find the courage to apologise to somebody, we're sort of giving them the gift to forgive us. Forgive us. But also we're kind of showing that, it's possible to apologise. I've got a friend I won't say who, but he's been married for 20 years and he thinks his wife's apologised to him about 3 times. I know some people just can't. They just can't do it. But it's a very beautiful thing if you can. So that kind of brings me on to remorse in Buddhism. So remorse, this feeling that we've done something wrong, it's seen in Buddhism as a very healthy thing. It's quite different to guilt. An irrational guilt. So it's not like you just think you're a bad person. That's got nothing to do with Buddhism. But just this natural conscience that says, oh, I've hurt someone, or I've hurt myself, or it's just seen as a very, very healthy thing. And so it is definitely something we just have to practice. And I remember when I used to work at the Norwich Buddhist Centre over 5 years ago now. About 5 years ago. And I used to walk in via Chapelfield Gardens. I'd be like, oh, this is so lovely, aren't I lucky? I get to walk through Chapelfield Gardens. Nice park in the city. And I just got into an inner rant. I just found myself, the rant I just pretty much always got into was, I would rant not about Donald Trump, but I'd rant about people who rant about Donald Trump. So that was my inner rant. I just got all self-righteous about these people getting all self-righteous about Trump. And then I got to the end of the park and it was like, oh gosh, what a shame. What a waste of a park. So I kind of made that my practice for quite a few years. I was up against this inner rant every time. Obviously it was happening in other places. It wasn't just Chapelfield Gardens, but I found it was, with time, it did soften, but I had to I still have inner rants and inner sort of imaginary arguments and things like that, but that particular one has just lost its grip on me, and it just doesn't really feature, and I think I've just seen through its just ridiculousness, but it took me a couple of years, I think. So this is a practice, this is a training, and it's a practice. Now actually I can, most of the time when I'm in Chapelfield Gardens, I really enjoy it, and I can just love the smells of the flowers, and even sometimes just yeah, well, it's got all sorts of smells, hasn't it, that place? But yeah, so on to the next verses. Not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified here in the world. They are pacified by love. This is the eternal law. Not by hatred are hatreds ever pacified here in the world. They are pacified by love. This is the eternal law. And I love that, like, this is the eternal law, as though it's written into the fabric of things, of like existence, of the human heart or something. And the next line is, others do not realize that we're all heading for death. Those who do realize it will compose their quarrels. Others do not realize that we're all heading for death. Those who do realize it will compose their quarrels. Yeah, another sort of just very beautiful line. Just reminding, sort of, I think that's the thing for me, certainly when I get cross or angry, it's, you know, I just lose the bigger picture. And life is, I'm sure we'll all agree, life is short and precious. But I just forget it, you know, and forget that it's much more important for me to sort of find a creative way to connect with a person or a situation that might be frustrating. And the other thing around, I talked about fight, flight or freeze, and that anger and fear sort of they seem quite connected in some way, you know, still work in progress for me, but they seem, when I investigate one, there's plenty of the other. Or certainly when I look at anger, there's a lot more fear going on than I realise if I'm just caught up in the anger. But if I can sort of get into the physical energy of the situation, it's like, oh, there's a lot of fear here as well. And for me personally, I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but very often, you know, so under the anger, there's sort of a fear. And under the fear, there's often, I just feel upset, or I feel sad, or I feel lonely, or, you know, I feel vulnerable, or confused, or something like that. So there's something kind of much more tender going on, actually. It's like I just defend that with my anger. I mean, that's not a Buddhist sort of categorization, but that's just kind of, I just see that happening over and over again with me. I sort of catch my anger, get sort of blown about by anger, try and get hold on things. There's some fear going on. And then after some time, it's like, oh, there's, you know, actually there's some kind of upset or sadness or grief or whatever. Yeah, kind of getting towards the end of what I want to say, what I've been sort of reflecting on as well recently, and trying to connect it with the Buddhist teachings of conditionality, which aren't just as simple as cause and effect. Right? Things are much more interconnected in a way, you know, we just have no idea how profoundly sort of interconnected things are, and we are. But I just notice more and more with my emotions, it's like, if I'm angry about something, if I really look at it, it's not just about that thing. It's also sort of an echo of another anger about something else, and something else. And it kind of goes back sometimes to things I don't even know what I was angry about. But it's like it sort of activates, you know, other moments in my life of anger. And same with, or just actually not talking about anger, just the other day, a friend of mine from Poland, an order member, but we meet up whenever I go to Poland. I've had connections in Poland whenever I go to Poland. She posted on Facebook that her father had died. Her mother died, I beg your pardon. Her mother died. And I got really upset about this. I was sad for her and the situation, but it was like I was also sort of recollecting my father who died, and sort of reflecting also on my mum's not going to be around for that much longer. And it sort of also connected me to sort of other grieving as well, and almost there was a sense of it, I didn't really know what I was grieving about as well. And it's like these emotions can sort of be gateways to something that's not your emotion. And that's kind of me getting to my sort of last point, that we can use anger there's many Buddhist teachings that see the arising of anger as an opportunity. One, of course, to train our minds and let go of anger and cultivate love. But another is to reflect that it's not just me that feels this, or feels fear, or sadness, or whatever. It's like this is other people, everybody feels this in some sort of form. So, if we can, difficult emotions like anger or hatred, I think if we work with them, they can kind of open us up towards compassion, because just connecting us with everybody. So yeah, that was kind of my last question was, do you see anger as an opportunity? Do you see anger as an opportunity? So 4 questions, and then a bonus question. So 4 questions. What's your experience of anger, particularly physically and energetically in your body? Do you know what's going on? 2, what's your response and reaction? Fight, flight, or freeze, or something else? Yeah. What's your tendency, if you know? How much do you take responsibility for your anger, or do you think you should? How easy is it for you to say sorry? And then number 4 is, do you see this as a kind of an opportunity? Could you see anger as an opportunity or a gateway to to compassion? And the bonus question: do you want to be a charioteer?